What a flattering introduction.
This meeting is being recorded.
Ooh. Okay. So yeah, we are now recording. Welcome everyone to another session of Wine Around the World. We are so pleased to once again welcome Steve Wilson from City Wine Market. And you know, I'm excited to find out about these women winemakers for March. So take it away, Steve.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Very happy to be here on this sort of rainy, cloudy, maybe snowy day. We'll see kind of what happens later, but this is a cool topic because female winemakers in the wine world should be more present than they are currently, and we have been following a great trajectory. I mean, as an example, today roughly 14% of all of the winemakers in California are women. That's not great, but that is almost double from what it was 10 or 15 years ago. It still is strange because the University of California at Davis is sort of the finishing school for winemakers, and their classes are more than 50% women, but women are not ending up in the winemaking positions as representative as they should be. So this is something that people in our industry have very much embraced. They're great examples of where women have made spectacular wines. For example, in the 90s, well, let me back up. If you've seen the movie Bottle Shock, it retells the story of the 76 Paris tasting, where California wines were paired against French wines, and for the first time in history, American wines prevailed in a blind tasting tasted by French wine tasters. So one of those wines came from a winery called Chateau Montelena, and Bo Barrett, the son of the owner there, was a kind of a major player in the movie. He was very instrumental in kind of getting the wines to the Paris tasting. His father was not wanting to do this; he insisted. My reason for telling you this is Bo Barrett's wife is Heidi Peterson Barrett, and Heidi Barrett in the 90s, Heidi Barrett was encouraged by Robert Mondavi to take a job as a head winemaker for a cult winery. Well, a winery that actually had no following at the time, but a winery called Screaming Eagle. She went on to then make wines for Screaming Eagle that to this day are still some of the most expensive, coveted wines in California, in the United States, really. I mean, a bottle of Screaming Eagle in a bad year might be $1,200 to $1,500, but that was the first time that a woman winemaker in California really had just annihilated the competition with her work. So women winemakers are growing. There are, I mean, we're seeing more of them, and the wines that they're making really speak for themselves. And so we have two of them here today. Actually, I wanted to before we slide into the wines, as I was kind of thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, there is a question that has been posed for many years. Are women better tasters than men? And one of my former instructors, a woman by the name of Karen McNeil. If you are in the market for a great wine book, she wrote a book called The Wine Bible. Very, very easy to read, great resource. But Karen has been in the wine industry for decades, and she asked many of her friends who are female winemakers whether they thought they were better tasters, and surprisingly, most of them said no. And Karen actually says no. The reason that she was posing this is there actually is science that would say otherwise. But before we get to that, she asked them, "Are you a better taster?" And the winemakers, the female winemakers said, I just think we approach it differently. And one of the things that they kind of Karen found as a trend among the women winemakers is that they are very meticulous and thoughtful. Not that men aren't, but women were more so. And then Karen, so she kind of went into the argument, no, there is nothing inherently different about men or women as tasters. But then she talked with some scientists, and actually there is science that backs up the idea that women of certain age, actually they found that women of childbearing age are better wine tasters, are more sensitive. They actually have more of ability to analyze flavors and aromas, and a better memory for remembering them. In fact, what the study showed is that women they actually do have more whether it's cells in the memory center, but in the olfactory center, but they do have the ability to detect finer smells and to remember them. And with practice, as we are doing today, with practice, they do outperform men. So Karen was like, well, I think her wanting to dismiss that science is because she doesn't want the argument to be made that women are better naturally, and that's why they're good. No, they're good because they are good, and they work really hard at being good. And yes, when they practice, they remember longer. I think one scientific study said that 11 times greater ability to remember smell. So that's not even close, really. But so there is actually a very good reason, if you were starting a winery, there actually is a good argument that if you have a great candidate who is a woman, you probably want to go with that, because she very well may make a better wine just because of these skills. And they talked about why do these skills exist during for childbearing women, and there is a belief that naturally during those years, women have evolved to be able to detect things that might be poisonous or things that might be dangerous for if they consume them themselves. So nature made them better tasters because they are the mothers. And so I think there are a lot of great reasons to follow women winemakers because they really are doing some outstanding work. So with that said, and I apologize to my former instructor, the science is there, Karen. Y'all are better tasters than men on that level. So, and it's funny because I in one of the articles that she cited, she said, I've taught many people, and I find that the women are better at describing flavors. And I'd been in class with her, and we had argued about things, and I was kind of thinking back to that time. But my classmates were pretty good at describing things that they were tasting. And Karen is a great teacher. So anyway, I digress. Let's talk about the first wine, the white. So this wine comes from Cuney, and Cuney is a Spanish winery. They have a lot of different projects. They do mostly Rioja, but they've got some projects that actually go outside of Rioja. The grape here is a grape called Viura. It's also called Macabeo. So if you like cava, this is one of the cava grapes. This is one of the leading players in the production of cava. But in Rioja, it is called Viura, and it is made in a fairly straightforward way. I mean, this is very crisp, very minerally. You get a lot of citrus, tree fruits, things like that. And but when I was kind of thinking about this topic of women winemakers, I had no idea that Cuney had a winemaker, a woman winemaker, and Maria Larrea is her name. And actually, as I was researching her, she's been there for about a decade, maybe a little longer, and her entire assistant winemaking staff is also female. So she's and that's I was talking with a wine importer the other day, Mary Taylor, who is building her own company. She imports wine from Europe, and she said, I just gravitate toward female winemakers. They're more particular, they're more precise, and I always want to give somebody gave me an opportunity to excel, and I want to reciprocate. And it would appear that Maria has done the same thing. But I came to know these wines based on quality alone, and I mean, outstanding quality. And this is, I mean, it's great to see this going on, because again, I don't know what the ratio for men to women in globally, but in California, 14% is pretty sad. And so more of this is gonna help advance what shouldn't be a thing, but needs to be, because we want better wine, and this is really good. So give it a sniff. This wine is again fairly bright. Fairly, they eat a lot of things out of the water in this part of Spain. So a wine that has bright acidity, minerality, that will pair well with things that are typically lighter in fat. They don't need a lot of richness to pair. They're kind of bright. So this is a wine that, white Rioja, it ages nicely. Although I tend to like them younger. But it's a wine that very food friendly, crowd pleasing, and a great example of Maria's work. Any thoughts on this guy? Well, if there are no questions, we can move on to number 2. All right. So number 2, we have Elena Volk. I love this story. It's it amuses me. Rarely do you see people able to have more than one career that they achieve at a high level. I mean, it's if anybody can be serve 2 great roles, serve 1 great role, that's impressive. Serve 2, that's truly unique. And Elena, she was trained as an architect, working in Milan, doing some outstanding work, being highly regarded for her skills as an architect. And she met her husband. Her husband is Wilhelm Volk, and his family owned a winery in Alto Adige, so sort of the northeast corner, mountainous foothills of and northeast corner of Italy, along the foothills of the Italian Alps. And so she married Wilhelm, and she said, well, I live in Alto Adige, you live in Milan. She's like, well, I'll move. We'll come and live. I mean, I will come and move to your winery. And over time, she started, well, I'm going to go spend some time in the wine cellar and with the winemaker. And over time, she kind of got into messing around. Well, I'm going to work on this project with the wine. And fast forward today, she is the winemaker. And it's funny because her wines typically are the top or the upper tier wines, and Wilhelm's wines have been relegated to the kind of the entry level. Still great wines, but the Wilhelm wines are not the tête de cuvée wines. Elena's are. She again, probably in the same manner she became a great architect, she focused on detail, and she studied, and she learned all of the nuances, all the subtleties of winemaking, and then approached it from that perspective. And it's the interesting thing is she really improved the quality of the wines from her husband's winery. I mean, the wines were good, but they didn't stand out. And since she has been the winemaker, the wines have increasingly gotten better and better, gotten more attention, got more praise. So these are wonderful wines. I love having them. We sell quite a few of her different bottlings. So the region is a cool climate region. It is so that they're not going to be doing a lot of big robust wines in this region. The region is also home to a number of indigenous varietals. Now you will see a lot of Pinot Grigio, Pinot Bianco from this region as in the white varietals. But the reds are typically, I mean, probably the more common one would be Pinot Noir, a cool climate grape, very suited to this area. But Lagrange. I always mispronounce it, so I apologize if I'm brutalizing it. This is a grape indigenous to Alto Adige, and it's somewhat related to both Syrah and Pinot Noir, which is great because that's exactly how you would describe it. It has a little bit of aspects of both. It's juicy, it's bright, but has a little more structure, a little more tannic structure than say Pinot does. But sorry, I need to pour myself a glass here. All right. Yeah. One of the benefits of this region is that, and similarly to that Viura from Spain, you're looking for, I mean, to get these really pretty aromatics and flavor development, you need a really nice diurnal shift. So where the days are warm, but the nights are cool or even cold. And this is kind of the secret sauce of Alto Adige. It has a great diurnal shift. The mountain, I mean, it's higher elevation, so it's closer to the sun. You get more UV, you get better ripening, but the heat isn't there to develop sugar that then has to be fermented away or left in the wine. So you end up with really, really great flavors and aromas, very, very focused flavors and aromas, and a nice, elegant kind of supporting acidity and tannin to go along. Yeah, I love that wine. It's certainly got more, I mean, you can feel in your mouth, it's got more tannin. than than Pinot, less tannin than Syrah, but dark fruit flavors, black cherry, black plum, blackberry. It's obviously gone into some oak there. There's some nice little wood toast to it, but a very complete wine. And because it is a little lighter in body, I mean, very food friendly. I mean, it will typically the foods of this region are the kind of the things that would grow around it. So sheep, pigs, those are things that would pair very well with this. Probably cheeses as well from sheep, primarily, maybe some cow's milk cheeses, but yeah, just a really pretty wine. And I've had horrible examples of this grape. It does need a good hand in the wine cellar to really pull this off. And yeah, I when I was going back to the debate about whether women are inherently better tasters than men, one of the things that was pointed out in one of the articles I read was that, you know, there is a sensitivity to the subtlety of flavor and aroma, and there is this wine has almost a perfume to it. I mean, it is pretty. The aromas are complex and developed, and just it has a very pretty nose. And they're probably, I mean, whether there is an argument that could a man make this wine as well, who's to say? But the attention to this wine that this winemaker gave was really quite good. I'm very pleased with this. Any questions about this wine?
Any thoughts? I think it's delicious.
I do too. These are two of the best wines we've had, without hands down.
Yeah. I think the quality of these wines, the focus of these wines is, they are very, very well made, and the tailoring on the wine is just perfect. They're wines that I've liked. Like I said, I had no idea that Kuhne was essentially all their winemakers are women winemakers, and I did read an article with Maria Larea, and she said, we tend to support each other more in the winery, which makes us better winemakers as a team, and that's a very valid argument. And it appears to be working quite well. So, but yeah, I very much like these.
There are a couple questions here. Someone asks, when you say it takes a good hand in the wine cellar to make a wine like this, what activities does that entail?
So it really entails, well, I mean, there's a lot of it, certainly a lot of activities, but outside of the chemistry, making sure that the chemistry of the wine is, monitoring the chemistry, that is very important. And those are very detailed. Usually, though, there is somebody whose job it is to monitor the chemistry of the wine. But where it comes into play is at the end of when the fermenting wine, the fermented wine is ready for blending, for bringing it together, the assemblage. You really have, imagine a conference table, and it's filled with graduated cylinders filled with wine. And what you're doing is going and getting individual, like a couple milliliters of one graduated cylinder and adding it to another graduated cylinder or a glass and blending it. So the precision of the final wine, I mean, the development of the final wine comes down to the precision of the blending. And so for the winemaker to be able to pick up, well, the wine that we made from this part of the vineyard, or for maybe it's multiple vineyards, but the wine that we made from this vineyard has a lot of dark fruits, and this one has more tannic structure, but this one over here seems to have some aromatics that complement the other flavors. So as the wine is being constructed, I mean, it's, you know, rarely is it, I mean, even when the wine comes from a single vineyard, or even a single block of a single vineyard, there is still selection. And so the precision of winemaking comes down to being able to make tiny micro adjustments to a wine and have it come together. I mean, I don't have the skills to do that with, I mean, I've been in the room when they've been blending at various times, and it's stressful, because it's like, it literally is, you know, maybe 20, 30 wines that have to be composed into one wine, and many of those won't even enter the equation. So you have to first be able to pick out, well, what are the elements that I need to make this wine complete, and where do I find those elements in this ocean of this sea of samples? And so I mean, that's the detail. That's, I mean, the meticulous nature of blending. And yeah, that really is the talent, because I mean, there's I mean, you got tanks and tanks of wine, and when it, particularly where it does see a barrel, I mean, you have, you know, many, maybe 100 different barrels that all could be somewhat different, and being able to figure out what you need from each barrel, that's quite the skill. That's talent.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. Let's see, someone else comments that the color is surprisingly dense and asks if that's characteristic of this wine.
Yes. So this is probably closer, I mean, in that respect. So as I said, this varietal has relatives both in the Pinot world and in the Syrah world. The color is going to be maybe some of that Syrah relative, that Syrah lineage coming out. It is, I mean, as you get higher in elevation, and I apologize, I don't know exactly where their vineyards are positioned in this region, but again, we are talking about the mountainous foothills. As you get closer, the grapes, particularly the grapes that are well suited for that environment, which an indigenous grape would be, has evolved to protect itself from the sun, essentially. And there are the antioxidants that, I mean, for example, some of the most the most healthful, the highest levels of antioxidants wines are made in Argentina, because the vineyards are at 4,000 to 6,000 feet in some cases. So the closer to the sun, the more the grape develops essentially the protection against UV, or too much UV, and that often is developed in these deep colors. So yeah, the color, I mean, that really is a beautiful color. I mean, not entirely. It's pretty close to opaque. I mean, there's some definite concentration. So I've never seen the grape. I've never seen or tasted the grape up close to know exactly like the thickness of the skin. But if I were making a guess, I would say that the skin is probably thicker. Well, certainly much thicker than Pinot Noir. And I mean, I get a lot of tannin there. That's in part where that tannic quality is going to come from. So yeah, this is a product of its environment. It gets a lot of UV, and so the grapes need that protection, and usually the result of that is deep color.
I've heard you mention indigenous grapes a couple of times. I wonder if are there any like movements among winemakers to like return to only growing grapes that are indigenous to their regions, or
yes, actually, there are. I mean, sadly, the wine world is sort of being reshuffled a bit. It is what I mean with the climate change that we are experiencing. Wine regions are also changing. In fact, whether it happens in this generation, it could, but there will come a day where Napa Valley, which is known for its Cabernet Sauvignon particularly, will not be known for Cabernet Sauvignon. That will happen. It is and it is likely that the grapes that will replace Cabernet Sauvignon are grapes from Spain, from Italy, from Portugal, grapes that are indigenous to those areas, but have evolved to be more drought tolerant, evolved to retain acidity when it's really hot out. I mean, grapes, generally, a lot of the grapes that we've favored historically like a cooler climate. But there are grapes from Greece and again, Spain, Portugal, southern Italy that do very well at retaining acidity in warm weather. So there actually we will see there are certainly regions in the old world where indigenous grapes. I mean, in some places you can't grow anything but indigenous grapes. I mean, unless you want to grow something that you then have to market as kind of an anonymous wine, which if you have a brand that you can attach to, why wouldn't you? You know, if you're growing Sangiovese in Tuscany, you're going to get more for that bottle than if you're growing, Pinot Noir in Tuscany, and not being able to label it as a Chianti or something. So, yeah, indigenous grapes. I mean, there is something to be said for something that has evolved to its environment perfectly, and where things are going to change is when what was perfect at one time has evolved, and so what varietal is best suited for, again, Napa Valley. It's getting warmer there. The ripening season is shortening. So where in the world are we going to find a grape that is drought tolerant? I mean, it obviously makes a compelling wine. That's first and foremost. We don't want to start drinking nasty wine, but that makes a compelling wine that's drought tolerant, that maybe, I mean, even they're looking at grapes that emerge later in the season and ripen a little faster. So later in the season means if you have poor spring weather. I mean, like for example, if we were in Napa Valley and the vines are starting to emerge and then we have snow, well, that's not going to be good for the wine. The vines, in fact, those little buds may just freeze right off. So they're looking at grapes, indigenous grapes that are more tolerant to extreme temperature changes, and maybe ripen in a shorter period that achieves the same quality that they're looking for. Because fast ripening for certain varietals doesn't yield good wine. So yeah, there's a lot of effort right now being poured into, well, what grape might we use in this environment that we've never ever thought of? And typically those are indigenous varietals that a certain region has grown, and that grape has evolved and they've learned how to grow. they've learned how the community that grows this has learned how to grow it well, and they know what it needs and what it works well with. And so, yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more interesting varietals that may be perfectly suited to a changing world that we are sliding into.
Well, we have a couple other questions here. How long can this wine age without being compromised? And then also, what does capital DOC on the label signify?
Yes. So, and I'm gonna butcher my Italian, but basically, the first question, ageability. As far as aging a wine, you're really looking for two things: one, bright tannin, and acidity. And this has both of those. I mean, I can feel kind of tannic, that drying, sort of astringent profile on that. Those will help carry the wine. The color. I mean, you're looking at a lot of dark red, blue, little blue, not much blue, dark red to the halo, kind of the meniscus on the edge, maybe light ruby. So the colors. I mean, this is a 2021, so this is a very young wine. I would guess that this would have no problem between 5 and 10 years still being a wonderful wine. It has a lot of tannic structure. It has great acidity, and the color right now is showing youth. It would that looks like a young wine. So proper cellaring, yeah, I would easily 5 or 10 years. And as that ages, you're gonna notice that the tannins will be more fine grained. They won't be as astringent. They'll soften, and you may get some more kind of earthy notes to it. But I think this wine certainly has time in a cellar. So that was the first question. The second question, DOC. So in Italian wine, there are and I'm going to forget all of the classifications, but basically, think of it like a pyramid. So as you start out, the largest, as you move up the pyramid, the area becomes more specific and the quality becomes better. And a DOC region, if you ever see DOC, and you can see that on food products as well, but DO is a region of a specific place of quality, a controlled region of quality. And in fact, sorry, I'm forgetting the Italian translation of DOC. It basically domain of origin, a domain of controlled, a region of controlled origin. So the region has growing standards, quality standards. In order to be a DOC wine, you would have to grow certain varietals. So you would have to grow them in a certain way, and the yields of those. So you could not grow as much as the vines would allow. There would be standards on all of that. But when you see DOC, there is an expectation of quality. It is also there is also so in the pyramid, there is actually one above that, DOCG, and DOCs usually larger categories of wine. I mean, broader regions rather. A DOCG might be a sub-region of a DO or a DOC. But there is a lot of wine that is just essentially table wine, and it is sold, and you won't see DOC. And in France, you will see AOC. AOP is actually replacing that, but you will see the same appellation, appellation origine contrôlée. But it's basically those classifications are to protect the quality from a certain region. I mean, this is an area that has been producing wine for hundreds of years. I mean, more than 500 years. And so if somebody is producing wine here, the Italians very much want the quality of that wine and the reputation of that wine protected. So if it is marketed as a wine from Alto Adige, from the DOC of Alto Adige, then it needs to meet certain standards. And so that's essentially, I mean, France uses this system. Actually, California, the United States, has its own category, and we have our own appellations. American Viticultural Area, AVA, is what you'll see in the United States. So if you were, again, let's go back to Napa Valley. If you're making a Napa Valley wine, 85% of the wine that goes into that bottle must come from Napa Valley. They do allow for a little bit of a wiggle room, to blending things in, but 75% of if you're in Napa Valley and you are making a Napa Valley appellated, so it will say on the label a wine of Napa Valley, it would have to be 75% of the varietal. So Cabernet Sauvignon, it would have to at least be 75% Cabernet Sauvignon. It would have to be 85% of the region, and it would have to be 95% of the vintage. And that is simply just to protect the brand of Napa Valley. So we stole that concept from the French, and it was borrowed by the Italians. You will, I should also say, you will, like, as I said, you'll see it on food products as well. I mean, if you get Parmigiano Reggiano, it has to be, cheese produced in, the region to a certain standard. And actually, in most cases, at least in the highest levels of classification, they will actually have tasting panels. So if you're a DOCG, which is a wine of origin guaranteed quality, they will actually have a tasting panel that will sample the wine and say, well, yeah, this does reflect this region and this style and this vintage, so you can be a DOCG wine. This is approved. So there it is. It's a quality control.
How do they select for that tasting panel? I assume they're trained professionals.
They are. They're. I actually don't know that. I met one. I've only met one person who was on one of those panels, and we were actually staying at his hotel in Piedmont, in a town called Bra. But he the owner of the hotel, Matteo Ascari, was the president of the consortio of Barolo, Barbaresco, and Langhe, and there's one other thing. But yes, that's part of what he does as a member of the consortio, is make sure that the wines of Piedmont are reflective of what historically wines of Piedmont are, and have abided by the rules of the region, of the surrounding region. And Piedmont has both DOC and DOCG regions in that area. So it's Tuscany has them as well. So every wine region in Italy will have, or many of them, not all. I think we were talking about Sicily today. I think they have only one DOCG and maybe 4 DOCs. So these are just regions that historically wines have been grown and made of a certain style and quality that they feel very, very, very dedicated to protecting. But yeah, the consortium, I don't know. I mean, because in many cases, the people on the tasting panel may in fact be winemakers themselves, so they may be judging their colleagues' wines. Usually, it's all done blind, so it's not something that they would have an awareness of. They would simply be tasting the wine and judging it for its quality, and then once they've judged it for its quality, then they have to the wineries will have to keep very detailed records about, how they grew the wines, what even down to what kind of root stock, because oftentimes roots, the bottom of the vine is different from the top of the vine. So they would have to say, well, we use this root stock, which is approved, and this clone of whatever grape they were using, which is approved, and we harvested at this sugar level, which is, mandated, and we only picked X number of tons per hectare, which is, mandated. So they follow they have to prove that they followed all the rules. So it's, I would not want to be a winemaker, nor a member of the consortium, because I think way too much stress.
Yeah, I don't think my palate it hasn't been trained. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not that.
Well, these are, I mean, the people who will taste these wines are tasting. I mean, they have to have in their mind, 10 or 20 years worth of vintages to be able to compare and make sure that it's true to form. I mean, makes my brain hurt, but I guess coming full circle, it would behoove them to have women on the tasting panel, because they would do a very thorough job. Whether it's more or less, I don't know, but clearly have some skills at precision. Yeah.
Good point.
I was just going to jump in and say one quick thing, because as those who've been involved in this for a while know, I'm kind of like the food guy with the wine situation. And I have to give credit where credit's due. I stopped by to get my wine. Of course, that took 45 minutes because Steve and I chatted. And with the Spanish wine, the white wine, we both kind of agreed tapas would be like, as he always, as the guru always says, you eat the food where the wine comes from. And so I did some tapas, and one of them was tinned squid. And tinned fish is not something that we, do a lot of in America. In our family, we really like a lot of tinned fish, whether it's kippers or anchovies or whatever. And I got tinned squid, but the point I wanted to bring out is it's available in his store, amazingly enough, because it's hard to find that. And I got some tinned squid, and it went perfectly with the white wine. I also did a chopped olive and anchovy and mushroom on a Melba toast as my tapas for the white wine, and it was delicious. And interestingly enough, as salty as the anchovies were, this white wine took a little of that out, and it was just perfect with it. It was just an excellent choice. So I'm just kind of pushing the tin fish here.
Well, I will. Obviously, I like. In Spain, they call them conservas, and the quality of the seafood that goes into can in Spain, Portugal, France, Nordic countries is of a quality that we would pay a lot of money for in a restaurant for the same quality fish. They just package it. And the northern part of Spain, very, a lot of I mean, they are fishing, they are fisher people, and have a great affinity for the ocean. So their wines, they often even have they love things out of the water, but they often have almost like a salinity to them. And you taste it, and it just, it's like lock and key. But I've grown to absolutely love tinned fish. It bears no resemblance to the 99-cent chicken of the sea. None whatsoever. The quality. I mean, for example, some of the fish mean, if you go into a sushi restaurant and you're lucky enough that to be there at a time when they have toro. So toro is the fattiest, richest, most coveted part of the tuna. And in Spain, they line fish tuna all the time, and so they also have tuna belly and canned tuna belly. You just take a little piece, maybe make a garlic aioli or something, put it on some crostini, little piece of baguette, and it's just spectacular. And it like I said, bears no resemblance to the in some cases trash fish that end up in canned, the inexpensive canned fish. This is the same quality that would be destined for a fine dining restaurant. In fact, there are Michelin starred restaurants that will serve tin fish on their menu, and proudly do so. I will say, I think even 715 maybe has tinned fish on their menu. So yeah, don't be afraid of the can. It's just keeping it in a good state until you're ready to eat it. It's just absolutely delicious.
Yes, I'm also a big tinned fish fan, so I'm all for it.
I've discovered that there are a lot of people who we our sports town has a lot of athletes, and athletes are always looking at packing on protein. And some of the I noticed that I'm like, I had customers coming in and they're buying cans of this stuff. I'm like, oh, you like tinned fish? I'm like, well, yeah, it's delicious, but no, I just like the fact that it's got 20 grams of protein in it, and I have it before I go to bed. It's like, okay, yeah, just have a glass of wine with it a little bit earlier in the evening. It's even better. But good stuff.
All right. Any other
Well,
questions?
anyone else want to share any notes? Or someone did say, I should point out before we switch to the second wine, that they loved the first one, the Rioja.
Well, I like I said, it's Rioja, and again, I mean, if you can kind of think about, if you're a fan of Cava, you can kind of see the similarities. I mean, Cava would be Viura. Well, actually, where Cava is produced, north of Barcelona, they would call it Macabeo, but Macabeo, Perolata, Xarel·lo, those are the kind of the three main grapes from Cava. But you can taste some of those same flavors in this wine. I mean, they're the stone fruit notes, the kind of the citrusy notes. You get that in this wine. And again, the salinity, I found, I did notice a little bit of a salinity note to this white, which again, they're things that grow together go together. They want their fish not to taste more fishy, but they want their fish to taste more oceany, and that little bit of salinity just kind of causes that freshness out of the water to pop a little bit more. But yeah, I hopefully. Oh yeah, I'm looking out my window. It is snowing now, so that's awesome. Not the wine, not exactly the wine that you would want on a snowy day, but give it a little while. It is a fresh vintage, so it's drinking quite well. I should also say, while we're talking about this, one of the bottles that Maria Larrea, the winemaker, has sort of pioneered, and was actually successful in getting it approved. There's a wine that Kune makes that violates the rules of the DOC. So let's see. So we were talking about DOC. If you see below Rioja, it's DOC in Spanish underneath the word Rioja. But Maria was able to convince the regulatory body of Rioja to allow her to produce a wine that is not at all traditional in Rioja, but she was able to do it because she was in their wine cellar and she found an example. But the other wine that we have from Cune that's white is Rioja blended with a tiny bit of dry sherry, and it's unique. I don't know of any wines like it, but it is a wonderful wine. Similar flavor profile, just a little bit of the sherry. Excuse me. The dry sherry adds sort of an almond, like a Marcona almond note to it. But the winery has a fairly extensive cellar, and she was in there. She found this bottle. She tasted it, and they're like, we're going to make an argument that this is actually traditional in the region, even though it's not traditional at all. It had been made before, and it had been made for many years, but yeah, she brought back this wine. So I don't have it in my store currently, but yeah, this wine, it's a blend of white wine and a little bit of dry sherry, and it's a wonderful wine. Even I would say it might even be better with things from the water than this guy. It just has a little more of an edge. I mean, of a symbiosis, I guess, with the food. But yeah, she's a rock star. Great stuff.
All right. I think.
What was the name? What was the wine that was blended with the sherry? What was the name of it?
Right.
You know?
I think it's Monopole Classico. I think that's what it's. Cune Monopole Classico. I may be off on the labels. It's similar to this, and there's this subtle difference, but as the weather warms up, I like it very much because it's just a great little appetizer wine. That little splash of sherry, which again, not traditional at all in this region, or I'm sorry, not a typical blend in this region, but Cune was able to make an argument to the regulatory body that no, this has been made before. I mean, 100 years ago, they were making this wine. And my guess is it was like many things. Usually things are as they evolve, are made out of necessity. And it was probably, they had a wine that maybe just didn't have enough body, or the flavors were not what they were looking for. And somebody dumped in a little sherry and they're like, yeah, this works. I mean, a similar thing happened with the development of port in Portugal. I mean, a monk threw some brandy into his wine, and suddenly it became shelf stable for a whole lifetime. Had no idea, but oftentimes necessity is the mother of invention, and I would assume that was probably how this style of wine came to be.
Right.
As the official timekeeper,
Yes.
we are officially past our time because I'm so bad at my job. So we're going to have to kind of call it quits for the day. I know that we have thrown into the hopper Rhone wines, which
we will do
Steve
Rhone.
is considering.
Yes.
And maybe we do that next. Chilean wines is on the list. If no other reason than they've had tremendous forest fires and they need us to buy some of their wines and help them out. And I will throw out Portuguese blended wines because I've had a few lately and I find that they're very interesting. So I don't know if Steve can do that for us.
Yeah.
No, I shouldn't say that. I know Steve can do that for us.
We'll get that on that.
Okay, so we have a few things for the future coming up. We look forward to you guys joining us in the future. Thank you very much for the participation. This was one of the biggest wine around the world ventures we've had. So for your new members, thank you. And we'll see you at one of our few upcoming events. Not the least is Dessert and a Movie next Wednesday, which is also for Women's History Month. So thank you for being here, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Be
Thank
well.
you, Steve.